So now we're on to gluing the rails in place, and as I mentioned before, pocket it into the forward and aft deck. We're going to have a splice on both sides with a small piece to cover that up. All these pieces in this nice, it's either freezer or refrigerator bin that I have. It's a nice wire one. The reason I use that is it doesn't allow foam to build up and collect. The little bits of foam they get everything, they just fall right through. So that's why I have it. And I have a whole bunch of stir sticks, strips of plywood, garbage like this. You'll need this to clamp on the outside of the rail so you don't crunch into your foam as you clamp it. Now the clamps are simply 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. Home Depot, probably other stores as well, sell it in, I don't know, about a 2-foot length. And I simply took it, I took my Sawzall, and you could do this with a handsaw, it would just take you longer. And I cut it into, as you can tell, I didn't really do everything perfectly, but that's actually better because and then of course I cut each one of the rings that I made again. And what this is good for is the fatter ones give you a better clamping force. The thinner ones, not quite as much. And so you can vary by how far apart you put them, whether or not you get a wide one or a skinny one when you're clamping. But first thing we need to do is Gorilla Glue. Because we want these rails fully glued into the decks, onto these rails. Because as I said before, these really are the backbone of the boat. These are what is going to give you most of your force that resists the boat falling apart if a heavy weight is put in the middle. Like if you've ever seen my picture, you can go find it on the Instructable or my Rower What Facebook page of me in the boat with it straddling a couple sawhorses, and then I also have my 16-footer with the boat upside down, and each end is supported on a 55-gallon plastic drum that's lying on its side, and I'm standing on the bottom of the upturned hull in the middle with it not supported for that whole span except by the foam in my boat hull. And believe it or not, when I did my first boat, which is the picture you'll see on the Instructables, I really didn't know what was going to happen, but I had a lot of people telling me, you need to do that. And since I was about to release the design on the internet to people to build, I kept having these ideas in my head that, what if, it's over 2 waves and the boat would suddenly collapse, fold in on itself. Or, have one wave lift the boat up in the middle and suddenly it broke in half the other way. So, I very carefully and a little bit afraid stepped into it with it straddling 2 sawhorses, and as you can see from the pictures, Sawfish number 1 did not implode or collapse in on itself, and Sawfish number 1 is the one that I continue to use for years and years and years. It actually has not had any structural issues relating to weight, and part of it is because of these rails. Now, I just showed you something wrong in this video. I don't know if you caught it while I was talking, but the looping style is actually what I recommend. I don't know why I went to the zigzag like I do in the scarf joint, but just a quick circle of glue over all of this, and that'll take care of my forgetting what I was doing for a second because I was talking. And this glue, I have not seen any failures in. I have not seen any failures in the plywood with it getting wet because of where it's located in the hull. But it is very necessary and structural to the design of the boat. And then, once we've got that laid in here, the next thing, of course, is what I mentioned. We've got to now lay it into the rail and get it clamped. So let me back out just so you can get a better view of what's going on here. So first thing, of course, get this one out of the way so I don't stick my elbow into it or something. Make sure that we have Gorilla Glue on all sides of this joint that's going to be right here between the deck and the rail, since the decks and the rails kind of make up for the strength of otherwise what would be a top deck to match the strength of the bottom of the boat. And I find it actually works very well. So pressed in place, down like that. Hopefully I got the length right. It'll be reset when I do this one. Do the stern part. And then the next thing is, of course, clamps. Now, as I said, if I just put this on the foam pulling against this, they're going to punch right into the hull and leave a dent that I really don't want to see. So take one of these stir sticks, catch it, pull it over, and I am also trying to make sure that this is above the edge of the hull. And in a long skinny boat like this, or just a long cockpit like this, where with the glue now there's a lot, it's giving me no more friction to help hold this in place. So the next thing I'll do is install just a regular old drywall screw. Nothing special. It doesn't have to be that big or that long. This is actually kind of longer than I need, actually. And simply install it right, drill it right through the plywood. And down into the foam, and it doesn't even have to go that far. It's just, this is kind of the same thing as the bamboo skewers do when you're putting the foam together. It's just pinning it in place. So now we'll go to the challenge, which is the long rail. Let me get a good shot here. All right, so we get this pretty much where we want it. And once again, put some glue here into my deck pocket so that I know that it is glued together well. Take the rail, set it where I want here. You notice how I flexed it in place like that? That actually really helps to kind of have some tension on it as everything is going together, to make sure that it's really pushed up tight against the foam. But the clamps are really what does that. So we'll grab all of our backup materials here. Start another clamp right here. And you'll find sometimes with the shape of your hull that this outer piece wants to slip off just because of the shape of the hull that you may have because of the way the foam is shaped. And the trick with those is simply take your clamp, oops, that's not good, and lay it over at an angle like this. And that way, they won't slip off, because what you'll find is this corner, this top corner here on the inside and the outside, will dig into the plywood, or your rail, your strip of wood that you're using for a rail, and keep it from slipping off. I also find with these, laying them over kind of helps you space to have even clamping along the rail. And as you notice here, I have this set a little high. I actually want to kind of get her down just a little, but the thing is, you don't want to have it go below the foam. And so that right there is kind of our limiting factor, is how low we can put this before it becomes a problem. And that really is what sets the height for the rest of it, because we don't want any of this along here down below the level of the foam. We want it all right level with the top of the foam or slightly above, because it's better to have some to sand off than to not have it all the way up to the height that you need. Doesn't that look pretty with all of those clamps laid in there like that? Helps to give a good spacing to the rail. And the nice thing is, if I had bought this many clamps of, like, say, those style there, which they're not cheap, or those ones there, which that's the Harbor Freight knockoff version of the Irwin quick clamp. Even those, $3-4 a piece, multiply that times all this, and it's quite an investment in clamps. Piece of PVC pipe, I forget what that would actually cost you right now, but I can tell you that it's only going to be a couple bucks for that 2-foot piece. If you buy a 10-foot piece and make a whole bunch of clamps out of it, you'll be even further ahead, but you'll have more than enough for a lifetime. I have used these clamps for a couple of years now, and I've had one break on me at this point. So they're actually very strong, and I've had different ways that I have tried to store them, but as I said, this basket worked out to be the best just because nothing collects in there. It all falls right through, and yet it holds my clamps. Usually holds the strips of wood if I'm careful with how I handle it. So there's one rail down, going on to the other one. So as you can see, I have made some investments in multiple types of clamps. Different times with woodworking and whatever. I have bought other stuff, but I really have to say I like the PVC pipe clamps better. I don't feel like maybe I'm going to crush the foam with them the way I can, especially with a screw type F-type body clamp, where they really have a lot of power behind them, and I feel that it could distort the rail if I clamp it down too hard. But what I'm looking for is, as I mentioned before, we want to have the rail sticking up above the edge of the foam, as you can see here. And we're also looking for the not to go more than flush. That's exactly flush right there. And we also don't want to crush it too far. We don't want to squish the foam in. We also want to make sure there's no gaps. So you want to sight down along this way, making sure that nowhere is the rail, like right there. I kind of wonder, I think that's a separation, so I'm going to have to put a clamp on that. And so as you can see, I just stuck a piece of plywood here on the outside to back that up so it doesn't crush the foam, and put a little clamping force on there. But these, as I said, you can go overboard with that and actually crush the rail. And I also had a thought. If you, like me, end up making your rails probably a little too thin, like I did on this boat, if you've ever looked at the construction of my first foam boat ever, Seafoam, the Mouse boat that's built out of 1-inch foam, if you happen to notice in the cockpit, basically the rails are actually made like this. They're not just an inner one. There's actually an inner and an outer rail. And if I do that on this boat, it will definitely add more strength, because that, you know, the vertical piece of wood right here with the foam sandwiched in between, fully glued, and another one on the other side, you're kind of making you're making a much stronger shape because of the two pieces with the foam in between for crush protection, but also for torque and twisting and flex and all those other things. Now with these rail pieces, you'll also notice I have the seam glued, but I'm still not going to trust that. I actually am going to, there's the one on this side, I am actually going to put a block of wood, as I showed before, like you can see here on Sunburn, my son's Sawfish that he built. Got this block and they tapered both ends. That's why you get that nice pattern in the wood. Just to make up that strength so there's no possibility of it breaking through. And it's the same thing I'm going to do on this boat for those seams. And also I'll be sanding off the foam that's there on the inside from where these were used before and had not been removed. So there's just different ideas you can do if you really think you need a stronger rail. Thickness is really the better way to go, I think. You know, the 3-inch ribs instead of 2-inch. Don't do as I showed you. I don't like it. And I think you know why now. But the, you know, just the overall 2 pieces of plywood sandwiched between foam are that much stronger if you end up with a thin rail like I showed here. And I don't think 2 inches necessarily required even for a 14-footer. If I do it again, I'm probably going to do at least 2.5 inch. But probably more 3-inch ribs just to be safe. But we got these, just showing the way we get the ends here pocketed into the actual deck of the boat. This right here just gives them more strength to have them anchored in there. And once this glue is cured inside of that pocket, that rail, the strength of the rail going along there vertically is really a continuation of this plane of foam, which is the strength of the top of the boat. So there we go, gluing on the rails, getting close to time to start covering this, and probably going to be launching it before the month is out. So now with the rails on, one thing I am finding is this hull isn't nearly as flexible as it was. I don't know if I'm going to have to go to another outer rail or not, but based on what I am seeing right now, I think I actually will not be too afraid to stand on this when it's complete. Stay tuned, keep watching, and you'll see what happens.